What is life? Is a question we humans have been asking for a long time. Biggest achievement of life's governing system is that products of its creation are able to look back at itself and ask questions to the very system that created them. And the system is responding by letting us see the footmarks of its journey to its beginning. In this 4-part series, I will be using the latest research to explain, in a simple language, the journey of life from its starting point on Earth, present insights on what life itself is, and finally show you the life force that runs inside all living beings and separates them from non living material. To look at the journey of life, let's start from us, the humans. Clearly, humans were not the first life form to emerge on Earth. The best explanation of how we humans got here comes from the theory of evolution. There is a common misunderstanding about how new species evolve or simply appear. Let's get this out of the way first. Study of evolution tells us that humans came after chimpanzees. Does it mean there was a chimpanzee who gave birth to a human? If so, why are we not seeing any more humans born out of chimpanzees then? Notice what I said. Humans came after chimpanzees, not from chimpanzees. That is the key difference. Evolution means that chimpanzees existed before humans did, and chimpanzees and humans had a common ancestor. There were intermediary species leading from our common ancestor to us, but the intermediates did not survive, creating a gap in evolutionary chain of living species visible to us today. Common ancestors of human and chimps lived around 5 to 7 million years ago and are extinct now. Evidences have been found of our common ancestors slowly evolving into walking upright, developing a larger brain, slowly drifting away in their biology from the chimpanzees. Intermediary life forms, the connecting dots, have been found. One famous example is a 3 million year old fossil, now famous as Lucy, had a brain of the size of chimpanzee but walked upright on 2 legs like us. So, to simplify, chimpanzees are not our forefathers, they are our ancestral cousins. Like it or not, we shared a common grandfather several million years ago who looked more like a chimpanzee than a human. From one species to another, evolution goes forward like branches of a tree. For a newborn, parents' DNA is copied as is and combined to create a life. Occasionally, copying errors happen that provide the newborn a slightly altered DNA that turns out to be either an advantage or disadvantage in dealing with the given natural environment. These surviving mutations aggregate in that same population to slowly evolve into a new species, like extending a new branch of a tree. These two species might look very similar, but would be different in their biology to no longer able to reproduce together. Evolution speeds up when environmental conditions and selection pressures change. Like when a group of animals get geographically isolated on an island for long periods of time due to natural events, or in earlier times when oxygen levels rose in Cambrian explosion 540 million years ago, or when the continental drift happened that started around 180 million years ago, separating South America, Africa, and India. Depending on the conditions, the burst of new species or a slow churn over a few 100 million years. Our genes copying error rate is less than 1 in a billion, and not every error accounts for a shift towards a new species. This is a random, step-by-step process of sculpting genomes that takes tens of hundreds of millions of years to create a new species. Evolutionary system has no plan for the future. It works with a completely opposite approach to that of a sculptor or a designer who has a final product in mind. Evolution works with no foresight or intention or any final product in mind. When we look back, it appears as if there is a design, while in reality there is none. Just random mutations, consistent selection pressures of changing environment, and competition for resources. It's all about surviving better under given conditions. As luck would have it, our genome keeps a historical record of entire ancestry through a unique gene signature. These ancestral traces of genes may be inactive now, but remain within ourselves to tell the story of our origin through the DNA comparison. Comparing with the closest ancestral cousin of ours, we share 98.8% of genes with chimpanzees. But even with nearly 99% of same DNA, see how different we and chimpanzees are in our abilities. Let's go back further into our ancestry, towards the originating point of life. We share 93% of DNA with rhesus monkeys, 85% with mice, and a good 15% with some plants. You share a common ancestor with that tree outside your house. The lower the shared percentage, the more distant ancestry is shared between them. The determination of a percentage number is very technical, but the fact is that we share a fair part of our DNA with all animals and plants, and even with a banana. How fascinating it is that a good part of what makes us also makes a banana, and how crude it is that every species feeds on its distant ancestors, with plants and roots coming at the end of this chain. That we all are related and are variations of same evolving pattern can be seen inside our bodies. Here is the skeleton of a human and bat. Here is the skeleton of a human and dog. Hand bones in humans, bats, and birds. Take any four-legged animal. Horsehead has same set of bones as in humans with a few exceptions. Same bones made longer or shorter, shaped differently. That's how relatable all animals and birds are. In general, we mammals came from rodents, birds came from dinosaurs. There have always been intermediary life forms connecting the dots, from primates to human, from fish to land animals, and from dinosaurs to birds. We can trace the evolution tree backwards to get to the common ancestor of all complex life on Earth today. All animals, birds, marine life, plants, trees, fungus like yeast, mushrooms, etc., and even large living cells like amoeba you read about in junior classes. This is the starting point of it all. The first ancestor of ours that existed 1.8 to 2 billion years ago. This first ancestor was a population of single cells, very much like our modern cells of today, that existed all by itself during that early phase of life on Earth. Over time, these living cells became more complex and new species began to evolve from these very cells. If you look at cells of today from a human, a horse, a pigeon, a caterpillar, a fish, or even a tree under a microscope, you will not be able to differentiate between them because they all arose from this first ancestor. If you are still wondering how can such varied plant and animal life emerge from one type of cell, remember that you yourself were made from one single germ cell by the instructions written in your genes of that one cell. Here is a snapshot of story of our origin mapped to Earth's timeline. Our first ancestor appeared nearly 2.5 billion years after creation of Earth. When it first appeared, it was already an extremely complex cell itself. From here on, evolution created new species over another 1.8 billion years and eventually us. So, is our first ancestor the last in the chain of life then? Actually, no. Story of life is rather interesting. This may be the last in our evolutionary chain, but was not the first thing alive. Even before our first ancestor came on scene, Earth had a teeming population of archaea and bacteria, as early as within 500 million years of birth of Earth. Bacteria are the most versatile gene exchanger, reproducing into all possible variants that eat metals, non-metals, organic materials, etc. One group might produce minerals as waste, that is food for another. They thrived into every nook and corner of Earth, living on whatever was available and creating and depositing minerals and rocks to change our land, flushing oceans with minerals, adding oxygen to the atmosphere. They kept transforming Earth alone for nearly first 2 billion years surviving till now for nearly 4 billion years, continuously changing in their own genes and biochemistry. While they changed everything on earth around them, they could never change their own simpler form, or grow their size, or become more complex living beings. It was as if there was some constraint on the growth of their size and complexity to not evolve into new species like our first ancestors did. The flowing story of life backwards to get to its origin suddenly finds a hole in the middle. On one side is the complex life originating from a common ancestor during last 2 billion years. And on the other side, we see a bacterial population living even before that. But bacteria never moved across this hole. This black hole in the middle is one of the biggest mystery in story of life. A void in life's journey that has not been crossed over by the bacteria. And no intermediate life forms, no connecting dots were ever found linking evolution of bacteria to our first ancestor. So what constrained bacteria to remain bacteria and never evolve into new species? If bacteria and archaea never crossed this void on to the other side, then how did our first ancestor, eukaryotes, came into being? Are we looking at two separate origins of life? One with bacteria quite early, within 500 million years of formation of Earth, and second with eukaryotes, our first ancestors. We will look for the answers in second part of the series. Thank you for watching.